So one of the things that I do for a living in my own coaching practice is I work with people who experience trauma in some ways. I'm also the NLP trainer of choice for training the therapists of the United States Armed Forces. I've trained many of them. And so some of my students were asking, like, well, what specifically do you do? Well, here's the thing. I'm going to spread this in 2 videos. So first of all, I want to educate a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder. And when I do and when I don't work on post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? So here's the thing. Post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma is a fashionable diagnosis right now. I promise you, decades ago, this wasn't talked about. Doesn't mean it wasn't diagnosed that much. But because we hear so much news about it, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even movies and things like that, we often have laymen assuming about themselves or others that they have post-traumatic stress disorder. And they heard a few vague statements as to what symptoms are. Now we have it. Even a lot of psychologists, they sort of like read the same information. So they start to diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, have you ever heard about post-traumatic growth? Isn't that interesting? I bet you haven't. I bet you never heard about post-traumatic growth. Well, here is the true science on that. When a group of people experiences a traumatic event, 20% ends up with the post-traumatic stress disorder that we read about. The sound triggers and, we start to do crazy stuff, right? 20% actually ends up in post-traumatic growth. Now, right after the trauma has happened, then we all have like memories that keep triggering. That's because the fear center of the brain is sort of like out of whack with the logical reality testing part of the brain, and it fires. So initially after trauma, we're all doing badly. But then what we do is like, that means I'm post-traumatic stress disorder, and other people start telling us that. But the chances are that you may actually have an opportunity for post-traumatic growth. Because after some time, after a trauma, 20% has post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic stress. And there's everybody in the middle. Does that make sense? And people are not educated about post-traumatic growth. The vast majority of people after trauma put their life together and end up better than the person that they were before the trauma happened. They end up more resilient. They look at life in a new way. They want to lead a life of meaning and purpose. They know that they can overcome. Their family members become more important. The things that are more important become more important. And that's the opportunity. And that's something to hold on to. If you have just experienced trauma and you know someone else who does, keep this science in mind because it's the truth. And encourage that person to understand that piece, to not go like, oh my God, now I have a mental disease. No, you have a lot of opportunities. And the only person that can truly diagnose post-traumatic stress is a medical professional. Do not touch it yourself. If you're a coach, a mother, a friend, stop it. You have no training to determine that. I would even venture to say that the majority of psychologists don't either. So you need to go to a specialist. And so, what are the opportunities for post-traumatic growth?